I'm JJ Heller, and this is Instrumental, a show about the big and small moments that shape our lives. In every episode, my guest and I start near the end of their story and work our way back to the beginning. I hope our conversation reminds you that every second matters, because none of us knows which moment will be the one that changes everything.
Big love happens in the small moments.
Hey everybody, it's JJ.
Hey, everybody. I'm not saying my name.
It's a secret. It's a secret name.
Just kidding. It's Dave.
Okay. We are back with another wonderful episode. I'm super excited for you to meet my new friend, Becca Stevens. She is passionate, tenacious, and so opposite of me in so many ways.
That is true.
But hearing her story has inspired me to become a little bit more bold.
I don't know how you couldn't be inspired after spending a little bit of time with Becca. She's an amazing speaker, a leader, and the president of Thistle Farms, which is a sanctuary for women survivors of prostitution, trafficking, and addiction. Becca is a mover and a shaker.
Totally.
Normally, before we get into the studio with our guests, I have a little pre-interview conversation where I just kind of talk about what we will be discussing. And I swear, as soon as I heard her say hello, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one.
She believes in what she's doing so much, and she does not mince her words. There's intention behind every single syllable.
We know you're going to love her story, so we're not going to take up any more of your time. Let's jump in.
Act 3, we are going to get through this. After witnessing an international crisis in 2007, Becca wasn't one to sit still. Over the years, she's developed a team of supporters and social justice warriors willing to breathe life into dead places. Let's hear from Becca.
So I had seen a documentary about the women who were fleeing the war in Syria and landing on the shores of Greece like millions of other people. And you saw the people crammed in the boats and the little kids crammed in the boats with those life vests. And it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And most of us have that thing of what can we do? What can we do? What can we do when we see something like that? And because I have that side of me that always wants to make something, I started thinking about what could we make with those life vests, that symbol both of escape but also of tragedy and just brokenness, and make something beautiful out of it. And I thought a welcome mat, because it's, stiff, hard fabric, so it's very practical, but it's also the right thing to think when so many places have closed the door that people might want to lay out a welcome mat and say, we love you, and we're thinking about you, welcome. That's what love does. Love welcomes. So contacted a couple friends of mine who were in California that funded the entire adventure. They fronted $100,000 for us to get a team together, to get a weaver together, to get an Arabic translator together, to get a couple women from Thistle Farms together, and we went
Well, can I interrupt for just a sec? Does that conversation kind of go like, hey, I've got an idea?
So I have a couple friends in California, one of whom had been to Lesbos in Greece and had met some of the folks just as they were landing on their shores. And another one had a philanthropic organization that can fund things.
Okay.
They're very good friends to have.
Yes.
So they're not random friends. They're specific friends for this beautiful adventure, Wendy and Franny. And
Thank you, Wendy and Franny.
oh my gosh, I thank Wendy and Franny every day. Anyway, so a group of us got together. There were 7 of us, and we got together and partnered with a group that was on the ground there called I Am You.
I Am You.
I Am You.
Okay.
And they had an actual presence in the camp where there was like the kids could play in this little safe space, just very small things. And we said, can we use one of your containers and get a couple looms so that we could start weaving? And basically the pushback was unbelievable from I think almost every organization in the camp saying you can't hire refugees, you can't pay refugees. If you invite 9 women to come and weave, there's going to be a riot.
Why?
Because so many people will be upset that somebody's getting something in the camp that not everybody's getting. And that was a question I said, is like, I don't think so. I don't believe any of that. And if you have Venmo, you can pay anybody in the world, right? I mean, you don't need a government agency. You just type in their number and transfer money. 9 women come together in a circle. Some are Kurds, some are Arabic, everybody from Syria. And we just start saying what our dream is to figure out how to get some economic freedom and independence for the women who on average now in refugee camps stay something like 17 years. So you're having babies, you're raising babies in camps. And a lot of times you're there until it's just safe, and then to be able to go back home, that you never really get to immigrate into another space. Many of these women's husbands had already immigrated to Sweden and Germany because they left Syria earlier when the borders were still open. So it's a lot of families separated. The women took about 10 minutes, and they said they were in, they were learning how to weave, and they were basically going to organize the whole daggum camp. You know, like we're gonna hire buses. We're gonna get all. I mean, it took no time at all. They got buses for the whole camp so people could get their children to doctors and dentist appointments, so that they could go get food out of the camp, seeds to plant so they could feed their kids and start growing their own food. I mean, they were amazing. Sitting there, I was like, it's like this everywhere in the world. You hear these stories that are full of tragedy and violence and vulnerability. You hear those same stories and how people just bear those on their backs. But also, if you get a small group of women together, they can pretty much organize a community. And, you know, my belief is really, you rape a woman, you can kill a village. But when you heal women, you can heal whole villages and community. So there were 9 original weavers, and they were, by the end of that first week, they're stripping vests, sitting around and talking about how awful it was and how much they hate these vests, blah, blah, blah. And then you could start hearing stories about one of the women saying, my teenage son, and then everybody going, Like, you don't even have to speak the language. You know exactly what they're going to say. Yeah, I don't know. It could be underwear in any place in your whole house except a drawer. You know, I mean, you know what's coming. Or my husband, and everybody going, You know, just nodding along. They were starting to do that beautiful sharing that is so important in healing. You could hear them laughing. You could hear somebody talking about a fear, about they weren't going to be able to ever get back with their family. There was all of that stuff. And it was that week when we were leaving that we said, let's let our mantra or our hope be, no matter what, keep weaving. In the face of war, we're going to keep weaving. In the face of the fears of this refugee camp, we're going to keep weaving. In the face of being separated by our family, we'll keep weaving. And they have. The first year we were there, no one would let you take their photo. It had to be blurred for social media for us to begin to sell. And, you know, People Magazine did a story the same summer we went. We were selling the mats.
Who are you selling them to?
Online. I think we pre-sold 300 or 400 mats.
Wow.
And they're $100 a piece. So
Yeah.
It was a good start.
Yeah.
And by the time we went back a year later, they were wearing jeans and these long-sleeve T-shirts that said Love Welcomes. And they had their hands in the air looking at the camera, and they wanted a group photo. They had remembered how strong they are. They had remembered their voice. And it was through this economic development. And because people were now able to travel to Athens on these buses, 5 other enterprises started in the camp. So like a small kiosk for coffee, a place where you could rent fancy outfits for births, weddings, funerals, whatever you would need, you could rent. What do we have? Rent the runway? So it was like rent the gown. And small businesses, but thriving businesses that were starting an economy within the camp so that people could start having a life, not just sitting and wait thinking life was something that's going to happen down the road. this is crazy. Probably the most popular artist in the world is an artist named Banksy.
Mm-hmm.
And Banksy became involved. And he developed his own design of a welcome mat and began to put that out on the internet. So now there's 43 weavers. It is hugely successful. It has inspired groups from other camps to work and develop their own enterprises and see how it is that when we are supporting each other and coming together, when we're mindful of that supply chain from the producer all the way down to the consumer, we're all healing. We all feel connected, and we are all part of a world that is more loving and more just.
And what a beautiful symbol of taking something like the life vest that symbolizes tragedy and loss, rip it apart, and then weave it back together.
Isn't it crazy?
And bring restoration.
And it's beautiful. That's the crazy thing. So it's the blankets, too. So they arrive, they get these blankets, these gray United Nations blankets. So we interweave the life vests with those blankets, and there's an organization called Dirty Girls that takes all the dirty stuff that people get when they land and they launder it all. So it's all clean and fresh. So we can take blankets, we can take old clothes, we can take the life vests. I can't wait. I mean, just go online and see it. It's really pretty.
I want to see it.
And there's a famous weaver, in addition to Banksy, who's got his own mat now. Margot Selby came from England into the camp to design throw pillows, placemats now too. So we wanted to expand the line because really you only need probably 1 or 2 welcome mats, but you need 8 placemats.
It's a good strategy.
Thank you.
Is Love Welcomes under the umbrella of Thistle Farms, or is it a completely different thing?
So what happens for us is we're almost an incubator at this point for organizations that want to start and work with artisan survivors. So I think I've started 8 organizations now.
Wow.
Or co-founded, I would say.
Can you kind of like rattle off what they do?
Thistle Farms is a global movement for women's freedom now, with more than 360 beds around the country and 50 sister communities, helping 1,700 women with 36 global partners. We are growing exponentially. We're still rooted right here in Nashville, Tennessee, with 3 amazing justice social enterprises and 5 homes. But our goal is to keep spreading the word that love is the most powerful force for change there is, and women that have known the underside of bridges and the backside of anger and the inside of prison walls are the best messengers for how powerful and transformative love is. So Moringa Madres in Mexico, and they grow moringa, which is a beautiful healing leaf that we blend into a tea. They're their own organization. Sabimbe in Ecuador, beautiful organization, developing these bolsa bags they're a combination. It's a brand new prototype between a backpack and a tote bag. It's like a combo that's really fun. Like you could take it to the beach, you could take your kids' stuff in it, but also you can just throw it on your back. So it's not like that tote that you have to drag around. It's both those things. Love Welcomes, Larkspur, which is a natural burial organization. You can bury people naturally, but, Thistle Farms is providing all the oils for all the bodies.
Oh, wow.
And then a school in Ecuador. And then Lawala is in Kenya. And so they had the sons of Lawala, the 2 doctors that started that, right?
Okay.
The 2 sons, of course, had a sister. So many of the women who were in the community that were HIV positive, very poor, in polygamous domestic violence situation, had no other options. We started the sewing cooperative there in Lawala that was, again, spun off and became part of the Lawala Community Center. But we made 6 or 7 products with them and got them going. It was fun.
So are all of these products available on the Thistle Farms website?
If you go to Thistle Farms Global, it's awesome. And the big one that we were working on right now, again, before COVID, when we were going to Peru, is the Monkey Project. So it's a very small organization started by a Peruvian woman. There's 3 people total employed. So we were going down there to expand. It's called the Monkey Project. They make basically sock monkeys, crochet them, and they're so cute. And they each have a story. They're adorable.
You started with $100,000 and one home.
No, we started out with a lot less than that. I think we had about 25,000 in the bank when we started Thistle Farms in one house.
And what has it grown to now?
Thistle Farms, our annual budget is about $7 million, and about 70% of that comes from sales. So the workforce is 85 to 100. It varies depending on the season. So some of it goes just into wages. It goes into raw goods. It goes into growing a company. It goes into marketing. It goes into planting new seeds to grow new plants. That's just how the world works. It's a scalable and sustainable model. We still raise money for the residential piece and the mission piece, and we always want to do that. I've never wanted to make candles and have the women who are creating the candles have to feel like they have to support all the new residences or all the new outreaches or anything like that. I always knew that if I could tell the story well, you can sell 1,000 candles at $20 a piece, but you can also take that candle and tell a different story and remind people of mission and sell that one candle for 1,000. Those sales help generate even the donations and the grants that we receive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what I've loved about enterprise my whole life. If you are mission-based, if you are a mission with a company, you can generate not only sales, but you can generate a lot of revenue.
As opposed to a company with a mission?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's been days I have ranted, by the way. It's really hard. It's hard to run companies and have no one come in the front door, retail companies, and have no one come in. That's very, very hard. Mm-hmm. It is very hard to watch a group of women in Honduras who can't get one product out of the country, and they don't know if they're going to be able to sustain a project they have loved and worked on for more than a decade. That kind of stuff is heartbreaking. But what I like to do is rant and think of it as a lament. Like, I don't want anybody to fix it. I don't care if it's a good argument. The whole country's screaming, I can't breathe. It's a hard time. There's a lot of ranting. And to let those rants happen and then get back to our true self that is grounded, that knows we are connected and we are going to get through this.
JJ, I think she knows what she's doing.
I think that's because she's been working in the nonprofit space for over 20 years now. And I really want to brag about all the amazing things that Thistle Farms is doing here in Nashville, but I don't want to give too much away because she tells the story so well in Act 2.
In order to get back to Act 2, though, we need to rev up our time machine. Wow, that's what it sounds like.
Time machine.
It says its name. Because we're going back to 1995.
Yes.
Time machine.
Time machine.
1995 time machine. JJ, what were you up to in the mid-90s? Well, I know the answer.
Okay.
You were in high school.
Yes.
And
I was a sophomore.
what was the mascot of your high school?
The Valley Christian Warriors. Dave always makes fun of me the way I say warrior.
JJ can't pronounce the word warrior.
Warrior. Warrior. War.
In fact, while she was trying to read the description for Act 3, I'm just going to play every single time she said the word warrior.
Oh, no.
Get ready. Here's a warrior montage.
And social justice warriors. 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 Well, that was thoroughly embarrassing and also entertaining.
I thought it was very entertaining.
Yeah. So the same year that I was a sophomore in high school, being a Valley Christian warrior, Becca had an idea percolating in her mind. Act 2, the turning point. Becca was in her mid-30s and had a passion to serve her community. And in one brief moment, an unexpected and innocent question from her little boy altered the course of her life forever.
Prior to opening Thistle Farms, I was already ordained, married, had a 4-year-old, pregnant with my second baby. My husband had a deal with Columbia Records at the time, so he was on the road a lot. So anything I was doing in ministry, I was toting along a 4-year-old pregnant and always thinking, about the laundry and the other million things on my to-do list. Y'all know that journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I was doing a feeding program for women who were on the streets. And we happened to be doing it right outside of the oldest strip club in Nashville, Tennessee, Classic Cat. It's right on 8th and Broadway in downtown Nashville. Mostly it was about trying to meet some of the women and get to know them in a different way, in a better way, in a more consistent way, just to build relationship, because that's really the most beautiful thing you can do is just show up every week for a while. So my son, bored, would have to go down there with me, and we were getting ready to leave. And honestly, it was always troubling to me to meet women who are on the streets and really not have a lot to offer except a sandwich and a pair of socks, knowing if you're desperate enough to need a pair of socks, what else in your world do you need? Putting him in the car, and I couldn't get him in the car seat. He was doing almost like Olympic strength back bend.
Oh, yeah. The arching the back thing.
Yes.
I call that the Iron Cross.
Yeah.
That's perfect. The Iron Cross. So he was doing the Iron Cross, and it's harder when you're really pregnant to maneuver around that Iron Cross to buckle the car seat.
Yeah.
And then I realized what he was doing was looking up, and outside this Classic Cat strip club, there was a huge billboard of a woman, dressed, the best I can tell you is like a memory of a cat suit, just a couple strings and stuff, but with cat ears and a tail. And he says, "Mama, why is that lady smiling?" And he was just staring up at her. I just thought it was the most innocent question a little kid could ask in the world. And what broke my heart was thinking, someday my son's not going to ask that question. It's going to fade into the landscape of how we, dress women up, sell them as commodities, and expect them to smile the whole time. And it was that day that I knew I was going to start a sanctuary for women coming off the streets. And I wanted him to know that we did better by women, that we have a lot of love, and we want there to be genuine smiles and genuine joy in people's lives and not abuse or objectify or commodify women. And so he grew up with Thistle Farms.
You have this realization, and then what were the steps that had to take place before Thistle Farms actually became Thistle Farms?
Establishing the mission, establishing a board, and then finding out how it is I could get money. I didn't want to take any federal or state money and get bogged down in grant programs. So thank God my husband, Marcus Hummin, had enough friends in the country music world that the very first thing I could do is between churches and country music artists, we could fund it.
Wow.
I like the wow, thank you. That's so nice. The first thing I did was establish that it was free. That was really important to me, that we were not charging women. So it wasn't going to be a halfway house. It wasn't going to be a treatment center. It wasn't going to be a shelter. This was going to be a home, and it was going to be free. Because I'd never met a woman that I'd encountered on the streets that had any money. So if I was going to ask her to pay, I was asking her to go hustle. So I knew it needed to be free. And then I wanted it to be 2 years. And what I was thinking is that everything I had learned, it was like people had to keep manipulating or hustling to get the next place. Like if I was only there for 1 night or 3 months, whatever that number is, I was always trying to figure out the next step. And to me, 2 years felt like, this is your home.
Yeah.
You can stay here and you can get better. And then the third thing that was really important to me was that if we were actually going to establish community for women, trigger, especially for women who have so much trauma in their early childhood life, just get rid of the authority. There's no house manager or mother. This is going to be people serving the women. I can be your social worker. I can be your doctor. I can be your therapist. I can be your drug counselor. I can be these things. But you have a home, and you are free. No one's going to be telling you what to do. That was the most radical piece and the hardest piece for people to get over, that women with pretty serious criminal histories or mental health issues and addictions and all of that, that they were just going to live free in a house without anybody in authority living in the house with them. When you start, a justice social enterprise or a church or a recording studio or not-for-profit, it's about relationships and cultivating those. And I learned that pretty quickly, that if you could get to know people and be in relationship, it's basic. It's forming community.
Yeah.
The house that we first moved into had been a transitional house that another not-for-profit was using. And I just said, I would like to lease the house for $1 a year, because I didn't think any of the transitional houses were working that well anyway. I could make this a beautiful home, do it exactly right. Because my whole belief is like, build shelters like cathedrals. That's inspiring. That's hopeful. That's worshipful. And that's what I wanted to do, it lavish, and to prove that if you do it, this beautiful work in love lavishly, we can house women for about half the cost to keep them in prison in beautiful homes. And so that's how I did it. And we got I don't even know what you call them, Certipedic mattresses, Bosch appliances, do it well and with integrity. And that way it becomes like an act of worship. It was a new way of approaching it, but it was a really old idea to have women come together in community and live together, and we're just the hosts for that, whether it was a convent, from the 13th century, or it was a retreat center from the 20th century. We know how to do this. One of the first women I met was a woman named Regina Mullins, and she was one of the first 5 women that came in. She was a powerhouse from the beginning, and she had a light and a beauty in her that I have loved for decades now. I mean, we're still dear friends, 25 years into this journey together. She came into the house, and she had been beaten up on the streets bad enough to where she had a cast on her leg. And the thing that happened that was crazy is right when I opened the house, it happened that it was the same week my mom passed. And so I was devastated. All these plans that I had kind of fell to the wayside. I don't really feel like engaging and doing all this work. Yeah. And I would say that Regina, more than anybody, just in the first few days she came into the community of Thistle Farms, stepped up to the plate, and she shone her light on everybody. She had known so much different abuse from men. Her addiction was so bad and brought her down. She had already had 3 kids. We're the same age. She was longing for them, and she would talk about them. Even on the street, she would just love them and talk about them. So she came into the home, and she really kind of took over because I was doing my grieving thing. But I would drive by in the evening to make sure people had gone to appointments, if there was something they needed in the house, whatever. This is probably 3 weeks later. I'm still getting to really know people in the house. I don't know everybody very well. I drove by the house, and it's in Sylvan Park. It was on Park Avenue.
So that's like West Nashville.
Yes, West Nashville. And so it was the same street I lived on, so driving by was no big deal. And I drove by, and I saw Regina through the window. You could see her in the living room dancing. It was August of 1997 now, by the time the house opens. Late in the evening, she's not dancing at the window. She's in the living room, but me looking into the house through the window, I can see her, and I don't see anybody else. And honestly, my first thought is she's on drugs. So I pull over and I knock on the door, and she comes to the door, and there's just gospel music blaring. And I was like, Regina, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm having a Holy Ghost party. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? Like, she's having a dance party with the Holy Ghost. I'm telling you, and she still has a cast on her leg. That's what I'm trying to say, is like, she was, not because she was healed and well, she was still new and broken, but her spirit was just powerful and bright and beautiful. And we just both laughed and we talked about it. And she was talking about how the other women were doing and what their hopes were and what their needs were. We talked a little bit more, and I went back out to my car. And I thought I had just witnessed something incredible. I knew it, and I knew it was an epiphany. I knew it was going to be big in my life. And I just sat in my car and cried. And I thought, everybody needs to know this. Do you know? I mean, it was like, we got to grow this. You know, when Mary had that hymn and sang the Magnificat, or when Hannah had that beautiful laughter and dance, and I thought, this is Regina's dance. This is like that. This is like that big and that scriptural. And it's like, I got to grow this. I got to do this. I mean, 3 weeks ago, she was on the streets being beaten, and now she's dancing. Well, you know, she ended up being the national director of outreach for Thistle Farms. She's helped hundreds of women come off the streets. I mean, right before COVID, the last thing she did, she was up in Connecticut opening a new house up there. She got her children back. She became full-time outreach director for us. She's lived into it every day. She fell in love. She got married. You know, I mean, it's a beautiful story that's not a fairy tale. It's a story that's so real about how when radical love calls us, we are changed forever.
Do you have a memory of meeting her for the first time, like before she came into the house?
I don't have a specific memory, and she has a very funny memory of meeting me. And she said she was so scared because she heard there was an Episcopal priest coming. I've never worn clerical clothes. So before she moved into the house, she wouldn't have known I was a priest. The day she moved in, she knew I was coming to the house, and she was like, I'm so scared that I'm going to meet this really uptight, horrible person that's going to be really judgy. By that time, I'd already had my second son, and I was carrying him on my hip, and came in with Daisy Dukes and a T-shirt, and just we hugged each other and laughed, and she was like, okay, I'm going to be safe here. I can do this. Because she said, I don't want to go to confession every day. And I was like, I don't want to hear your confession every day. We're both good on that.
Yeah, works out.
You know, she had been on the streets. She had been in jail. We were gathering people up. I went to the Nashville jail where a friend of mine was a counselor that I went to high school with. Another friend of mine was the policeman at the front desk of the jail that we went to high school together. Some of the parole officers went to high school with me in Nashville. Like, I knew everybody at the jail. Just if you went to Overton High School, you knew a lot of the staff and people who were in the jail. That's the nice thing about those big, huge schools in Middle Tennessee. Anyway, I had gone into jail, and the very first time I talked about the dream of this home, there were women weeping. I can't remember everybody I met. It was probably 20 people in the room. We currently, in our community in Nashville, Tennessee, at Thistle Farms, we have 5 houses now. We cap our waiting list at 100 women on any given day. There's so many women who are longing for sanctuary and safety and freedom. It's a gift to offer that to people. Regina, who was in that, like I said, in the first 5, she was so committed to this model where women get to be their own heroes and the rest of us just get to be the host for them to do this work. She was so committed that she had some friends on the streets that she invited in. And I was like, it's full. You can't just invite them in. And she goes, I know you're working on another house. I'm like, but it's not done. And she goes, well, they're moving in and we got to figure it out. I mean, like, seriously, she was that kind of powerhouse, like going, no, we're not waiting a year to open the second house. We're opening it now. And so then I had to go again back to this sweet, kind, forgiving board and say, it looks like there's a couple women moving into the other house. We better get some insurance and electricity, and we're going to need another $20,000. And everybody did it. And it was that thing of when something is good and right, you can't always just plan things, right? You have to say, I'm going to say yes to this. Love is asking me to say yes to this. And that's kind of been the journey that I've been on, is just saying yes.
Creating crafts and products and that kind of thing, was that always a part of the vision, or was that something that came along later?
Yes and no. I grew up making everything. That was the mantra of my mother. We can make it, and that's kind of like a call to do well in hard times. And it's also perfect for the season we're in now, right? Just making things on your own and figuring it out.
Yeah.
My mom and my family, we homemade just about everything. And, in this time, during this whole journey of COVID, I've loved how quickly everybody went back to does anybody know how to make masks?
Yeah.
Can anybody make hand sanitizer? Can anybody, we have to figure out how to make some of this stuff. And those skills I've always loved and have. I love creating things. I mean, every product you've seen at Thistle Farms started probably in a pan in my kitchen. I mean, I've loved blending healing oils and making candles and making body scrubs, all of those kinds of things we made from the beginning. So I love doing that. And we made a lot of those arts and crafts projects even before we had an actual justice social enterprise.
So this was just a kind of something to empower women. Here is something to do. At the end of this process, you are going to have a beautiful product that you had a hand in creating.
So, I don't know. That's not one of the words I use. Empower is not a big word for me, because I always think it means I'm assuming I have power and you don't, so I'm going to give you some of mine instead of kind of recognizing everybody's power. This is what I think. I think women have gathered and made stuff forever. We have been doing this forever, whether we're doing a sewing bee, whether we're canning, whether we're going down to the river. It is part of how healing happens. I'm a huge believer in that. So if women can sit together and we'll make candles together for the day and put peaceful lavender, what happens in that day is people tell stories, people support each other, people laugh together, people cry together. And by the end of the day, you may have 20 candles and you're also bonded. And for me, it's much better than saying, I need you to go into therapy 4 hours a day, every day. I mean, that would be really, really difficult for me. I love therapy and I appreciate what that gift is, but I need some other things. And there are women that will tell you in 2020, in their recovery, in our community, it has been crocheting, it has been needle pointing. It has been foraging for acorns, whatever the thing is that has kept them sober and sane. I don't know if y'all have found doing anything, some of those kinds of fun things that you've always done.
Making
but has
a podcast.
Making podcasts is exactly like that.
I've been baking a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when COVID first started happening, I just kept baking cookies, cake. We kind of went for it. But it felt very therapeutic.
Yeah, I really do think making something with your hands and there's also a sense of, look how beautiful this is. And it's like, look how pretty I am because I made this beautiful thing, Look, I've made this podcast. Look how amazing I am. I mean, it is kind of that same thing at the end of the day, I think. And so I've always had that as part of the community. We just didn't start making money at it till about 4 years later.
Yeah.
That's when we were like, guess what? We can sell this stuff. And women who have huge criminal records and blank spaces on their resume that aren't getting jobs can make enough money to pay back the courts, to get their children back, to decide what it is they want to eat and what kind of car they want to drive and where they want to live. And, now we're sitting here and they have 401ks.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yes, raise hands.
She's raising the roof.
So grateful for that. So back in the day, when y'all were probably still just babies, back in 2000, 2001, this is before there was a word called social enterprise. I mean, you couldn't major in social enterprise. Back then it was called like cottage industry kind of thing. But it was simple. I mean, you didn't have to have a huge business plan to start something like this. So I've always been, for 25 years, also a chaplain at Vanderbilt University. I'm an ordained Episcopal priest, but there's a little A-frame chapel that I have had been the chaplain of for years and years, and I've loved it. And it's a part-time journey for me, but it's this home altar and this really safe, beautiful space.
How many people can fit inside it?
100 and 125, very small,
Yeah.
very small. And I had this space, and I could invite...
In the chapel?
Yeah, I mean, it also has a kitchen and living room area. It's a chapel, but it's also a facility. The women from Thistle Farms would drive over in the white minivan and park in the back and come in, and we just used the kitchen, and we melted wax and beeswax and added olive oil and some lavender and filled the whole space with beautiful scents. We started shucking our own lavender, meaning you just kind of rub it in between your hands, and we would make lavender sachets, bundles for people's beds. We started really simple recipes just to make healing oils that you could roll on your skin. Everything was pretty simple back then. And we just sat in the living room space, and what happened was that a lot of different students and faculty members wanted to get involved. They liked this idea of starting this. So we had somebody that designed the labels and somebody that did start writing out a budget plan. We called it Tupperware with a Conscience. Like we would do Tupperware parties and then just say to people, this is why you need to buy this. And the products were good. If you have an all-natural product that you make with purpose, it's not that hard. So the quality was good, and people started ordering them again and again, and we outgrew the space. So we went to another space. We outgrew that space, and that's how we ended up in West Nashville on Charlotte Avenue in a big manufacturing space and then big retail space. We sold wholesale to other retailers. There were small bookstores or just mom and pop stores that started carrying our products. But it was about 2009 that we got our first big order from Whole Foods.
Wow.
The learning curve to get into major retailers like Whole Foods was the steepest learning curve we had. It's much different than selling to friends or selling to...
Tell your next door neighbor.
Yeah, selling to a church community. I preach on a Sunday morning and then set up a table in the back and sell a couple $1,000s worth of products, which is awesome. But this was a different ballgame. And it's where you had to really understand all our supply chain had to be certified organic.
Wow.
We had to be able to make margins on everything. And, you had to be able to sell less than wholesale price to be able to get into that. I mean, it was just understanding the culture and understanding the process and understanding the paperwork. It took a couple years to navigate that.
Was that something that you took on, or was there someone else who...
Oh, listen, I was so desperate for us to do well in those stores. We would make products Monday, Wednesday, Friday. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would drive out to the Franklin Whole Food stores and buy the products off the shelves. I was just like, it has to move off the shelf. And so for a couple months, I would buy... I had so many bath and body care products. I was paying full retail price for it that I had made and sold at a different price. And I'm like, this cannot be a great marketing strategy at some point.
This is not sustainable.
This is not sustainable. I'm going broke. But it was like, I thought if we didn't sell anything, then they wouldn't be friends with us anymore.
Sure.
But I'm not sure. I wouldn't recommend that necessarily for anyone else as a marketing strategy.
Sounds like it worked, though.
It did work. It did work.
So,
but I was going to say is that Katrina Davidson, she came into the program probably 2005. She has an amazing and heartbreaking story. And most of the women that I have worked with over the last 25 years are, first raped about 8, 9 years old and first hit the streets around 15 years old. And for most of the women, their first medication is drugs. I mean, that's part of the numbing, and that's part of how you manipulate and keep people down. She came into the program, and I asked her if she wanted to be the national director of sales. And she said no. And I said, well, I'm just going to take that as a yes. Because you can definitely do it, and no one else can.
Well, and how old was she at that time, approximately?
How old was Katrina? Let's see. She had a little girl was probably 7 or 8. She was mid-30s probably, I would say. And her young daughter was on her lap. And what we do every time somebody comes into the program is, we ask them just to draw their dream. One of the things I believe with my whole heart is that you can imprison women, you can beat women, you can addict women, you can prostitute women, but you cannot kill hope in people. We have a right to hope for as long as we have breath. And so just draw your hope. That's the question at the beginning. You don't even have to write it out. You don't have to do a 3-part thing, just a little index card. Just draw what is your hope? And maybe we can all rally around that hope enough to breathe some life into it with you. And we were sitting there together, and her little girl, you know how kids do, they have those whispers that everybody can hear. And she's, draw a house, Mom. Draw a house. And it was beautiful. In other words, I want to live in that house with you, and we want to grow up and all this. And so Katrina became the director of sales. She helped navigate the waters for those first Whole Foods stores, worked tirelessly. She built a house for she and her daughter. She got married, the love of her life. He's amazing. They even adopted another child. Her daughter went off to college, got her degree, and when she graduated from college, we had probably 100 or 150 Whole Foods stores. She had gotten a marketing degree, so she came back and took over the Whole Foods account for us, the daughter of Katrina.
Wow.
And she flew out to Anaheim, California, to meet the entire staff of Whole Foods. And it was going to be an opportunity for us, not just to be in our Mid-Atlantic region, but to pitch something for the entire Whole Foods company. So now you're talking about 400 stores. And Ebony, Katrina's daughter, said, I just don't know if I can do it. I'm so young. She just graduated college. I'm not sure I can. And, Katrina says, I really need you to go. And she was like, I just don't think I can't. And, and Katrina said, I'm going to take that as a yes.
Good line.
Seriously.
She learned from the best.
Exactly. Like, don't hear the no. It's a yes. I'm going to take that as a yes. And she went out there, and of course, the entire Whole Foods staff gave her a standing ovation and wept with her. And she was a little girl that could be on this, without her mom and still dream of a home and have it realized. And sometimes I think all of us get in this space, at least I do, where I wonder if what I'm doing, is it that big a deal? Does it matter? If I can not think macro all the time, but sometimes just remember a story like Ebony, that she grew up a whole different life and went on to college and has succeeded so beautifully. It's like, it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
You can change the trajectory of a family, for generations.
Go after your dreams, as crazy as they may seem. Go chase all the stars in the sky. Baby, I'll be paving the runway, 'cause I know that one day you're gonna fly. I know that one day you're gonna fly.
So 15 years after my first encounter with the strip club and my son and being inspired to start this community, I got a call from PBS that they wanted to do a special, and it's called Turning Point. And they said, can you pinpoint one moment that was the turning point? And I was like, oh yeah, we have to go back down to where that strip club is, because that was the turning point for me. So a crew of 2 or 3 people and myself go down there, and I was all ready to tell them the story about my son and, in front of this, in my mind, intimidating and well-established strip club. We went down there, and there was just a sign on it that said, for lease. It had all been shuttered and closed down, which I didn't know. And when it said for lease, it gives the square footage of the place. And I was standing there looking at the sign going, oh my gosh, this community we've built, Thistle Farms, is like 8 times bigger than this. And that's how it is so many times in our lives. These things that we think are so big and more powerful than we are really nothing. And they closed down and we're thriving. Love is powerful. It is a force in this world. And so the turning point became another turning point where it was, I could buy this building if I wanted.
Wow.
And that's how, it was like, I could buy this. But I was just so happy that if we follow our ideals and our dreams, it doesn't mean that we're diminished or less powerful than these things that seem like they are monumental and institutionalized. We can change it.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. We have these fixtures in our life that we assume are immovable, but everything changes in time. And the obstacles that we thought were so huge can end up crumbling right before our eyes.
And how about that story about Ebony, huh?
Yeah, incredible.
I told you this was going to be a good one.
You were so right, Dave. I should never have doubted you.
Warriors don't doubt, JJ.
A mighty warrior never doubts.
A mighty warrior. After hearing Becca's story, you might be wondering where all of her resolve and strength came from.
Her story begins in the late 60s.
It was a time when this song was at the top of the charts. Let's see if this one rings a bell. Better, 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 better. Wow!
Nice.
Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. Hey, Jude. Jude.
Sing along, everybody.
So yeah, in the late 60s, Hey Jude was on the charts, and 2001 Space Odyssey was capturing people's imaginations. JJ, what is a famous line from 2001 Space Odyssey?
Boring, 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 space, space, space.
I was kind of looking for open the pod bay doors, Hal.
No, I don't even know that.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
That sounds like a tongue twister.
I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave.
Is his name Dave?
Dave is an astronaut.
Ooh.
I know. Boring, 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 space, space, space.
I shouldn't say that. I've never seen it.
No, it's really boring.
Okay. Is 2001 Space Odyssey a musical? If it was a musical, I would watch it.
There is famous music in 2001 Space Odyssey.
Are there lyrics?
That was not very ominous.
Okay, this is a super random piece of trivia, but do you know what that song is called?
Something spoke Zarathustra.
Yeah, thus spoke Zarathustra. Bum, 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 bum.
Warrior.
Weird. Okay, so basically, we're in the late 60s.
2001 Space Odyssey was in the theaters, and Becca's life was about to be turned upside down. Let's hear Act 1, JJ.
Act 1, Who Promised You Fair? When tragedy struck Becca's family, she knew she could always look to her mother for leadership and support. This act includes some very bad news, a macaroni necklace, and an alter ego. Becca will take it from here.
So when my mom was turning 35 years old, it was her birthday. Somebody came to the door and they asked her to come with them. They were very vague. I was 5 years old. I was home, and my little brother, who was 2, was home. I have 3 older sisters, and they were all at school. So somebody just came to our house and started staying with us. I do not remember who that person was. And my mom was gone for several hours. And at different points in those hours, my older sisters came back home. We're ages 2 to 11. There's 5 of us. And that afternoon, my mom came home, and I'd heard at some point during the day that my father had been in a wreck. And she came home, and she gathered us, and we went upstairs and said, your father is dead. He's been killed. It was a drunk driver in a semi-truck, and he's dead. And she said, but y'all need to get it together. My mom was unbelievable, like kind of scary strong. And she said, there's a whole bunch of people downstairs, and we're going to get through this day, and then we'll fall apart. And for some reason, her saying that, we kind of did. And I don't think I knew, like, I don't really remember anything about my dad. That memory is so etched to me about that day and all the things that transpired. And we go downstairs, you know, and I'm waist high to this house full of adults. And I can remember cloth. I can remember food on the table. And I remember people just like touching my head and my shoulders, like all over me, that they just kept trying to be reassuring. And all I wanted was my mom. That's all I wanted. And that would remain true for years. You know, she was my rock. She was strong. She was crafty. She always tried to make things really positive for us, even though it was really, really hard. I mean, she was thrown into poverty with 5 kids when our dad was killed. And she made our bread. She made our clothes. She made stuff. And the big event would be if we all went to the movie. And I can remember piling out of the car to go to the movie. And if we had to park really far away, she'd go, oh, we're so lucky that we got to park far away because y'all can all run and get all your exercise so that you sit still in that movie theater. I mean, like, she never, like, took it as a negative that, like, we had a really bad parking place. That was the kind of person she was. And she remained that way for me. And she was steady, 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 because so many people like myself, when there's one trauma and one tragedy, then there's a bunch that ensue. And for me, it was that, you know, the guy that tried to help, quote unquote, our family, who was one of the elders in the church after my dad died, sexually abused me for years, starting at the age of 6 years old. And, you know, it was horrible. I always think if it hadn't been for my amazing mother, who was a safe place for me, I could very easily have swapped places with many of the women I've served at Thistle Farms. But she always taught us to be for the underdog. She always taught us to try to help make things better in this world and to love this world. I mean, she loved children more than anything. You know, if you made her a macaroni necklace, that was better than a diamond you could have given her. If you drew her a picture, she would frame it. And she wasn't doing that to be nice. She saw beauty in it. And so I really think my love for homemade things, my love for community, my desire to be a steady rock for people, it comes from my mama.
Well, even the fact that if you had to park really far from the movie theater, she was still weaving something beautiful out of something that wasn't ideal, you know? And it sounds like not only did she create with her hands, but she was like weaving this beautiful environment around all of you.
You know, she was a kind of mom that she would take you on a walk when you were a kid, and it was always an adventure. Like, you always had like some kind of tote bag so you could get the moss and get the sticks. She would make a terrarium. She would make a fairy house, whatever it was that we needed to make. But it was like we were going on an adventure. So if you just saw rocks and sticks and nothing else, it was still very successful. Do y'all do that with your kids?
A little bit, yeah.
It's kind of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, their imaginations are pretty incredible.
There's a lantana bush on the corner, like down the street from our house, and they have a little mesh. It's kind of like a cylinder with a zipper.
Oh, yeah.
And so they've been catching moths because there aren't any butterflies on that bush. So they've been catching moths, and they call them butterflies, and they bring them home. So
That's so sweet.
yeah, it's really great.
I love it. So I grew up in South Nashville and Thistle Farms in Northwest Nashville.
Okay.
But my mom started working at St. Luke's Community Center, which is in Northwest Nashville, about a mile from Thistle Farms. So my journey, was in and out, and then 10 years ago, I ended up a mile from where my mom did her work.
Do you drive past that building
Yes.
and think about your mom every time you do?
Yes. I think about my mom anyway. I hope everybody does. I hope people who loved their moms get the opportunity to grieve well. I mean, it's one of the last things we do as a faithful daughter is grieve well for our moms. So I always think it's like this is another way of honoring her is just to think about her, like when you drive by this community center, to see it and think, oh, you did something beautiful. You were great. And also then I pass stories down to my children and believe that that's another way that I get to keep her love and memory alive is to share those stories. She was famous for her peppy sayings that I didn't understand half of them, but she was the kind of person that would say, snap out of it a lot. Or, we can make it. Don't freak out. We can make this. We got this. We got this. She would say, who promised you fair? That was one of her big ones. She would say that all the time. Like, if you said, that's not fair, she would say, who promised you fair? The whole idea is that life wasn't going to be fair and we were going to make it through it and do well and be strong and be positive. I mean, that was her whole way of being in this world. The other thing she used to do that I think now it was kind of brilliant. At the time, I think it was crazy. But if you're a single mom with 5 kids, 35 years old, struggling economically and trying to keep a house clean, trying to go to work, all of that, one of the things she used to do is when she cleaned the house, she would say, your mom's not here, it's Beverly Jane. She would pretend she was the maid.
Ego.
She had the alter ego of the maid. So you couldn't ask her to do anything as a mom because she was busy cleaning the house or whatever. She would go, your mom's not here, Beverly Jane is here. And we were like,
Oh,
it totally
amazing.
worked. Isn't that funny?
I love that she came up with a name for her.
I know.
Because sometimes, like, especially during COVID, when it's like, mom, like just so many requests all day long. Sometimes I'll just say, mom's not here right now.
Yeah. What I would say is this. I am my mother and father's daughter. The apple did not fall that far from the tree. My dad was an Episcopal priest. I'm an Episcopal priest, even though I didn't know him and even though they didn't ordain women at the time. My mom was a great community organizer. I'm a good community organizer. I didn't do Thistle Farms or stand out in front of that strip club because of them, but that was an influence. I wasn't out there because somebody sexually abused me when I was a kid, but that was an influence. I was out there because really I do believe that was my calling and my heart's desire. But it was definitely influenced by the people in my life and the events in my life. I'm grateful for all the stuff that happened. I'm grateful for all the mercy I was shown over the years and all the things that helped bring me outside that place. And I try not to overthink it. I try not to overanalyze it. But I do think all the events in our life play a part, but there's also some just beautiful wonder about how we got lucky enough to end up right here where we are.
We started out with your son looking up at the billboard and asking, why is she smiling? Do you think that Thistle Farms would exist if that moment hadn't happened?
That's a really beautiful question. That is really beautiful. I don't know. I had the idea before the billboard, and like all of us have ideas about how we'd like to see the world. The problem is we're all really busy, and we have plenty to do. So sometimes it takes an event like standing in front of a billboard to get us off our bottoms to actually do the work. That was what I needed. That was my little kick to get me up and going. It may have happened or it may not have happened, but I know that it was what I needed to make sure it happened.
If we handed you a note card right now and we asked you to draw your hope and your dream, what would you draw?
I would not draw anything new. I would be building from the foundation I've been building for 30 years. My hope lies in this foundation and its growth. It might have like a lot of sparkles on it and sunshine and butterflies. It would be a more beautiful vision of the community that we've built. And everybody that says they love us would buy our soap. That would be what I draw, is like the website to say, don't just say you love us, go on the website and buy our soap, because that makes a huge difference. I just want to grow it. I just want to write and dream and sit with women and still say, we can make it.
She is the exact kind of person that you want on your side.
I want her on my team. Or maybe I should say, I want to be on her team.
Yeah.
I mean, she already even said it. She won't take no for an answer. She's just the kind of person who will continue hoping for you no matter what.
I love the way that she loves people.
And I love that she has a bunch of ideas and is just able to give them away to women who are willing to carry them out. I'm going to say it again. This was a good one.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up our show, we need to recap Becca's story. So, let's rewind the tape.
Becca leads Thistle Farms and continues to advocate for women across the world.
But Thistle Farms wouldn't exist if her son hadn't looked up at a billboard one day in 1995.
Because Becca was outside a strip club in downtown Nashville serving women and rallying her community.
Which she only learned from watching an inspiring community organizer,
her mother.
To find out more about Becca and to shop for Thistle Farms products, visit thistlefarms.org.
This episode of Instrumental was produced by me, JJ Heller.
And me, Dave Heller.
Our theme music is my song, Big Love, Small Moments.
That I helped write.
To find out more about me, listen to more of my songs, or watch my music videos, please visit jjheller.com. That's 2 letter J's, HELLER.com.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Instrumental.
So be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.